that connects it to the dorsal surface of the body wall. Right, that whole long tube. That whole long tube is really, that's not the fallopian tube, that's a uterus. Now it's not well developed, so it looks like that broad ligament is pretty much a waste of time. You know, why such a big, strong thing? Well, remember, that's made for when this pig grows up and has two uteri full of little piggies, and it's walking this way. That broad ligament is going to suspend all of that from the wall of the abdominal cavity. And don't forget, how big are all those little piggies? This big and bigger, each one. Is going to be hanging from one of those, hanging inside one of these uterine horns. Now the even smaller tubing, if you look closely then, right next to the ovary, there's an even thinner little tube. That's the oviduct or fallopian tube. You see this very thin, tortuous tubing here, right here? Right, that's a fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is actually not directly connected to the ovaries. The egg is ovulated, or the secondary oocyte is actually ovulated into the abdominal cavity, and if all goes right, it is actually drawn in by a little bit of a vacuum that's generated by the ciliated cells that line the fallopian tube. And it's in the fallopian tube, the sperm coming from the other direction, that fertilization is supposed to take place. All right, so that's the fallopian tube, and that's the actual uterus. Will differentiate into a functional uterus way down the line. You see now where the two of them come together, that will become what's called a common uterus. In our species, we just have one common uterus. We don't have uterine horns on the left or right. And then that leads into the top of the vagina. See how you have, here's the uterine horn on the right, here's the one on the left looking from the dorsal surface. You see how they come together there? That is the top of the vagina. I know, it's very embarrassing, isn't it? Whatever your name is. Yes. So,
feels like child porn. Just
Yeah.
kidding. This is the baby pig.
The best analyzation.
So it's even worse. It's bestial child.
Exactly.
She's weirder and weirder.
Everyone feels awkward
It's the
now.
only kind I like.
Oh my God, so creepy. Yeah.
Right there.
Well, you got to get used to it if you're going to teach biolab, right? Okay,
Sure.
so what I'm trying to do is sort of remove some of this soft connective tissue so you can see these things distinctly. You remember these are the umbilical arteries, and this is the urinary bladder. And if we get some of that out of the way, and then if we actually cut through the pubic symphysis into the pelvic region of the abdominal cavity,
Dying.
now we can see from the urinary bladder, what tube comes from the urinary bladder that goes to the outside? It's called the urethra, right? And behind it, coming from those two common uteri, behind it is the vagina. So you actually have, as you look down here, you have basically kind of three pipes going down. You have in front you have urethra, and then behind it the vagina, and then behind that you have the colon coming down, right? So you have an advantage if you're a girl. If you want to remember the order of those pipes, all you have to do is look down, and then the openings are the same as they are in your body, because you're mammals too. Not now. I mean,
Before the next one.
in the comfort and privacy of your own home, Do try this at home. Don't try it. No. Try this only at home. All I'm saying is that in that order, going from front to back and also from cephalic to caudal, it's urethra, vagina, colon. And that's the same order of the openings. Now the thing is here, you won't find three openings in the fetal pig. You only find two. You find the opening to the colon, and then you find what's called a common urogenital opening, because you see the urethra and the vagina come together about 2 centimeters from the bottom. That's because they don't separate until shortly before birth. They gradually separate. And so the By the time she is born, a girl mammal of any species has completely separated her reproductive tract from her urinary tract. Urethra and vagina are completely separated and will always be that way. So very straightforward from the ovaries to the oviducts, through the uterine horns, common uterus, right? Uterine horns, common uterus, vagina, that's behind the urethra, that comes from the urinary bladder, and then the colon behind that. All right, so that's the female anatomy. As I say, on the gross anatomical level, the female is simpler than the male, which is a little more tortuous. One reason being that in the male, the urinary tract and the reproductive tract are not completely separated. They both sperm and urine come through the urethra. Now we can have our little boy here.
Proud parents. Proud. Yeah. That's our boy.
Wasn't a tuition.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Is that one of yours?
Ours.
That's yours? It is yours, okay.
Proud parents, yeah.
Indeed. Look at that. I bet you probably don't use the car seat right, see? That's the parents you are.
Oh,
You know how to strap them down, otherwise, you're endangering your children.
yeah, of course. I strap my kids down all the time. Not even for driving cars. Just strap them down.
You have a couple of kids here?
No, hopefully not.
Sorry.
Never. Not after this class.
I mean, not floating around anymore.
Trying to get this.
That's it.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Might get confused at the hospital. You'll end up taking home the wrong one. Okay, we're going to be doing some more cutting here also.
Okay.
Now, with the testis, it's a little more complicated. First of all, notice how, if you look at the base of the bladder, it appears to be kind of like already strapped in, but like a seatbelt. You see that? See that? That's actually not a seatbelt. Those are actually the two vasa deferentia, each one being a vas deferens. If you cut one of those, or both of those, you'd have a vasectomy. And the book is actually slightly inaccurate. It shows them both entering the base of the bladder where the urethra starts. And by the way, that area will differentiate later on into a prostate and seminal vesicles and all that reproductive stuff that a fetal boy doesn't need. So they're not developed yet. But they actually come together into like a little T-strap to a common duct that goes into the base of the bladder where the urethra starts. But now look where it's coming from. It's coming from this hole in the floor of the abdominal cavity, and you also have this spermatic artery and a nerve going right into the same hole. And those holes in the abdominal cavity, one on the left and one on the right, those are called the inguinal canals. And I believe that those are in the book in bold type. The inguinal canals are the canals through which the testes descend and end up in the scrotal sacs, which are sacs of external skin that hang outside the main body cavity, because those last stages of spermatogenesis, when those spermatids have to differentiate into sperm and the DNA gets squeezed down to a very tight package, has to be done at a lower temperature. So the testes need to descend through the inguinal canals, and in the human species, that descent has to happen to be complete before birth, or you can have infertility because the body temperature is too high for sperm production. In the case of animals, especially like herd animals, that typically only reproduce when the weather is warmer, the testes actually get retracted in the off-season, and the inguinal canals stay open. In our species, the inguinal canals can't stay open because that would be too weak to have these two gaping holes in the abdominal muscle wall, because we walk upright and there's too much stress. So what happens is they descend before birth, and then those two inguinal canals get filled up with connective tissue plugs. And if you lift something, if you're a guy and you lift something a little too heavy or a little too quick or a little too much the wrong way, you may pop one or the other or both of those plugs and have yourself either a single or a double hernia. Right? So those are called technically inguinal hernias when those plugs pop, so they're not supposed to pop. Anyway, we're going to pop them open by cutting the abdominal cavity through the pubic bone like we did in the female. We'll stay on one side so we can actually expose the route of descent of the testis and the epididymis that surrounds it through the inguinal canal right into the scrotal sac. So we cut that open, and now we can see right here, here's the vas deferens, which comes from the epididymis, which collects the sperm that's made in the testes and the seminiferous tubules of the testes. And here we see we can fish it right out of the scrotal sac, and there it is. Here's the testis, that little sort of bean-shaped, pigmented gland right there, and around it you can see the epididymis, which stores the sperm after it's been made in the testis, and then the sperm during ejaculation will actually come out from the epididymis all the way through the vasa deferentia and out ultimately through the urethra, which descends initially like it does in the female from the base of the bladder, but then, and this is the part I always screw up because I always end up cutting it, but I don't want to cut it because it's very difficult to do. You see how, maybe I don't even have to cut it to really show you what's going on, because you can see where it comes down. It goes through behind the pubic bone here. Oh, I guess I will cut it. It descends down. See, I still didn't get all of it. It's behind the pubic bone right there. There it is. Tell that distinct snipping sound. You can see it kind of disappearing there. Again, from the urinary bladder, trace the urethra going down through the pelvic cavity, and then it comes up around the pubic bone. You see this tube here? That's the urethra, looping back up, and it goes underneath the skin, and it opens right there, below where the umbilical cord is.